Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Complex Like Wine, where we talk about complicated things and improve over time, just like wine does.
Hey, you did a really good job with that.
Thank you. That was our second try. Well, today we have Miss Zyra, our founder of Complex Like Wine.
It's so weird to hear our founder. And if you guys don't remember, we have Jasmine back. I don't know. I don't want to take over.
No, go ahead.
This is going to be the last episode for this season,
Yeah.
which is awesome to say, 2 seasons of the podcast. But Jasmine came up with a really cool idea that why don't we do the last episode where she kind of interviews me. So it's a way for you guys to get to know me better if you don't really know me. And just kind of like a year of reflection. So I really loved the idea. So that's why we switched spots in terms of who's running the show.
Right. So I'm your host, Jasmine, and we have Zyra here. So this episode, I just kind of just wanted to just publicly say that I'm so proud of you. This year alone was a big one for you, and I really think that you have touched so many people with this podcast, and I myself am really happy and fortunate to have been a part of your season and your podcast, and even on my season, or my episode I should say, I even got DMs from people like, wow, this really touched me, it's really helped me in this way. So even just being in my own episode, your person in the hot seat, it just really made me feel like I made an impact. So I can only imagine how you feel, but you should feel so proud of that. So I just wanted to say I'm so proud of you, and just wanted to recap this season with you, and so that they can get a little bit of an idea of who you are and just where you've been, where you came up with this idea of doing the podcast and what sparked this new season, and kind of what you are looking forward to doing in your next season.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you ready?
I'm ready. Before we start, we have our wine.
We do.
So I gave Jasmine a Stella Rosa.
Yeah.
She has the black, and I am drinking a Shiraz. So
Ready?
Cheers.
Cheers. Well, that's good.
You like it?
I do like it.
Okay, I thought you would like that one.
That's good.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, I thought you would like that one. Well, no, honestly, thank you so much for the sweet words. It means a lot for someone to say that and just to kind of recognize the growth I've done this year. Because like you said, especially the beginning of the year, was a huge moment for me, good and bad. And so to see now, like I was telling you in the bathroom, reflecting just how this December has been. At the time of recording this, it's December. It's right before Christmas.
Yeah.
Just how this end of the year is such a 180 compared to last year. There's been a lot of reflection and growth for the past week, and lots of emotional tears, but good ones, lots of relief. So it just feels really nice to be able to close the year out with people like you, that we got reconnected through the podcast, which is crazy. So 100%. We can talk a little bit more about that too in this episode. But yeah, I'm very thankful for this year. I definitely did not expect to be where I'm at now last December. So it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, and I think that consistency is everything. You've been consistent, you've put in the work, so it really has really shown, and you'll be starting school very, very soon.
Very soon.
So, yeah. Who is Zyra?
Who am I? I know you're texting me this, think about who am I? I was like, damn, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
That's tough.
It's a big question.
I would say I am resilient. I am very caring. I am tough. I am hardworking, especially with the things I'm really passionate about. And I think this year's also been a thing of reflecting, just truly embracing me, the good and the bad. And some of the things I think when I reflect back to younger me, especially middle school, high school, was, I was never quite similar to most of the other girls in my classes. And so there was a lot of like a big disconnect in just the way I think people viewed me or just the way I am innately. And I think a lot of that has to deal with, you know, the way I grew up and all. So, you know, always being feeling kind of like the black sheep or the outsider. But now as an adult where I'm like really, I feel like this year's been the peak of really embracing me.
Yeah.
And so I feel the most at home with myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. I can resonate, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, you can just feel the growth and where you've come. So where did the idea of the podcast kind of come? Like, I think you may have touched on it even your first episode, but what made you do, like, mental health, things like that? Like, because, I mean, everyone can do a podcast. What made you choose this niche?
So for people that don't know, and maybe you've barely discovered my podcast and you're listening to this episode, so I got my bachelor's in film. So directing and screenwriting. So, you know, when it comes to all the technical stuff, like I know how to do that.
Yeah.
I graduated 2020 though. So, you know, pandemic hits and there's no jobs available. And I had my quarter life crisis.
Yeah.
I literally had no idea what to do because since the age of 9, I knew I was going to go to film school. Like I had all my eggs in one basket, which, you know, probably in retrospect wasn't the smartest thing. I wish I had explored other options during undergrad, but I knew deep down that's what I wanted to do. So I just did it. So kind of realizing, shit, this sucks. And I have always dealt with mental health issues. And maybe we'll touch this more in this episode, depending how the conversation goes. But, you know, since the age of 6, I had dealt with depression, suicidal ideation. You know, there's times where, like, I tried to attempt, you know, dealt with, severe depression, 10 years of my life, literally up until 2023, severe anxiety disorder, you know, panic attacks, anxiety attacks. It was a huge roller coaster of things I've had to go through. Growing up in not the healthiest household with, you know, a really, really, really bad relationship with my mom, that there's just a lot of unresolved things, even though by the time I had graduated college, I thought I had it all figured out. And I was like, shit, there's a lot of things that are like coming out of the closet. And also growing up in a religious environment, you know, only going to Christian schools, growing up in a Christian household. Not that mental health is bad, but it's not encouraged to go seek a therapist because I think the whole thing of pray about it's kind of like the go-to.
Yeah. It's like, well, did you pray about it?
Exactly.
Talk to God?
Yeah. God will take care of it.
Right.
Which, like, yes, I have faith in that. But,
100%.
you know, there are professionals, like therapists out for a reason.
Yeah, they are.
And so 2020 going to 2021, I was just really not okay. I don't think I've shared this with the podcast or really anyone before. But, you know, middle school and high school, I used to deal with self-harm. And I think going into 2021, I had done that again. And it had been like maybe 8 years that I had ever done that. And that's when I realized I am not okay. Like, I need some serious help. So I decided, like, I need to go to therapy. So, you know, I went through my insurance, finally saw a therapist. And right away, she was recommending me books that I can read. And I was eating up the books. I fell in love with it. The book that really changed my life is called, I've said this so many times on the podcast, Self-Compassion by Dr. Kristen Neff. That book changed my life because I've always been the hardest person myself. And I realize the relationship I have with me is the most important, and that will affect all my other relationships. So I really needed to work on that. So after going through therapy and learning more about mental health, I absolutely fell in love with it. Like, funny enough, during undergrad, for a hot second, I was about to do my minor in psychology because I've always loved psych and just the way the people work in the mind. I've always loved it, but I just didn't do it. So after really falling in love with mental health, I knew I wanted to create something. Like, and I was burnt out with film. I didn't want to do it anymore, but I knew I still wanted to produce something.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, podcasts are cool. I've always wanted to do a podcast. Like, let me do it on mental health because there's things I'm learning. And if it can help one person, like, I've done my part. And so that's how I started with Complex Like Wine. I came up with the name because at the time, well, actually before, like, I'm really into wine. You know, I even worked at a winery. And, you know, there's the whole thing in terminology of complex wine. There's just layers and depth and, like, different things. So I was like, well, we're complex. Mm-hmm. So why not have a space where you're, like, chatting with a friend, having a drink, and it's just...
And you vent. Like, this is just...
You processing and reflecting and growing. Yeah. So that's the niche I wanted. I wanted it to be very informal, very relational. You're just here with a friend, chatting, just sharing experiences and learning from each other. Yeah. So I started that 2021, and right away, the feedback I got was just outstanding. Just like people calling me, texting me, sharing with me their stories. And it made me realize even more that this stuff, like, there's still a lot of work need to be had in terms of mental health and psychology that, like, if I can do my part, like, I want to do it. And so now we are here at the end of season 2, even though there was a year break of a hiatus, which we can probably get into that. Yeah. But it's been super awesome. And then at the time of recording, I am about to start officially my graduate program in positive psych. Like, I got into grad school. Like, it's happening.
She says it like she's surprised. I am not surprised.
It's just so cool to say that's happening. So by the time this episode's out and people can listen, I've already been doing school. Yeah. So it feels nice after lots of prayer and reflection of, like, okay, this is what I was called to do. And it's not film, but film is what got me here, surprisingly enough. So I've just enjoyed the whole journey.
Yeah. And you need things. Like, I feel like that's normal. Like, there's things that we grow out of, people we grow out of that allow us to find new interests, figure out what we're supposed to be, where we want to be, what we're called to do. So film may not be your new calling, but it definitely got you here because you're good at it. So that's a plus. It's definitely a skill of yours. Yeah. But yeah, let's reflect on this past year alone.
Yes.
All right. We were in the bathroom and we were talking a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. What growth have you seen the most, I would say, from last year to this year?
I would say the biggest growth that I've experienced, to put it bluntly, is not putting up with bullshit. And just...
Say it again one more time.
Not putting up with bullshit.
There we go.
Like, just speaking out for myself. Speaking up. Just really speaking up. Being more bold on saying things that make me uncomfortable or things I don't like. I am a very nice person, to the point where I've knowingly have been such a pushover. And so there's been lots of experiences this year where I've really gotten to challenge myself and not be a pushover anymore and let people know, like, these are my boundaries, take it or leave it. Yeah. So I want to say that I think just putting my foot down on my boundaries has been probably the biggest growth I've noticed.
Yeah. What do you think that you're still working on?
I would say that's a really good question. I think my journey with fear of, like, intimacy and closeness, especially with a significant other, there's still a lot of growing and learning I have to do there. But I think just because I've been a lot more authentically myself and stating my boundaries, I have been much more comfortable with sharing that part with people I've met, whether platonically, like friends, or like people I've been dating. And so I think that part, over time, I'm just going to have to really work on that muscle, especially, and we'll talk more like romantically, like whenever things really happen there, like I know we'll have to work on that muscle a lot, but I think that, and I don't know, do you think there's anything from like the outside perspective that like you could see like
I really think you hit the hammer on the nail right there, where you're like, just you're so nice that you're a little bit of a pushover. I feel like you've definitely gotten so much better, and you've taught me a few things. You've definitely gotten so much better, so I think that is probably, if I were to give any kind of constructive criticism, that would be it. I've seen the growth, but of course, like we're nobody's perfect, not all perfect. There's things that even we think we've mastered that and still could use a little bit of work. But I don't know, I would just say continue to hone in on that boundary and those, that factor, I would say, of those relationships, kind of figure out what you want and just be really direct about it the first time around. So there's no room for, if you want, no, like, let's do this.
Yeah.
What do you think? You know, kind of thing. So that you don't give room for other people, because I don't want other people to, like, take advantage of you or anything, but just so it gives room for you to be like, this is what I want. Like you said, take it or leave it. This is what I have to offer. Whatever relationship it applies to. But I think you've been doing a really good job at that. So I've definitely seen the before and the current. So it's definitely different than it used to be. So
I think if people that knew me from last year, they're no longer in the picture this year, I think they'd be kind of surprised.
Yeah.
I think they would be a little surprised.
Like a reintroduction, like, hey, let me reintroduce myself.
Is Zyra.
Right. That's so funny. But yeah, no, just keep doing it. Keep pushing. And I think even as we get older, I was talking to someone else about this, like the things that we even care about change. So there could be things that you don't even know you want, or things that you don't even know might even come your way that you're going to have to squeeze into your life or find out if that works, or apply those boundaries or apply those things that you've been working on towards those things. So you might even surprise yourself and run into something that you meet for the first time,
Right.
So just be open, but be firm.
Yeah.
I would say.
No. Thank you.
Yeah.
I always am like wanting feedback, so I appreciate it.
I never know how to give feedback either.
No, I think you're good at it because you deliver it like nicely, but you don't like tiptoe around things. Like the times where I've tried to talk to you about stuff, you tell me your 2 cents.
Okay.
And I'm the type of person, like, tell me straight up. Like, if it's blunt, like, I'll handle it. It's fine. But tell me straight up.
Yeah. I think my biggest problem is just like you said, like, I'll give you my 2 cents, and usually I'll be like, do you want my 2 cents?
Yeah.
And then I'll let they're like, maybe, maybe not. My thing is delivery. I feel like delivery is everything, but sometimes I have to really marinate on it before I give my response, because that just really says everything. Like, you can say something that's maybe not the nicest, but you could deliver it in the best way.
Right.
But yeah, that's something that maybe I'm working on too. But yeah, just, I would say, just keep doing it. And even recap. I was even told, like, hey, write things down. Like, hey, if you visualize it and even have something to refer back to, like, even people do like little sticky notes and will put it in their bathroom, or a lot of people lately, I feel like the more digital thing is having it on their screensaver of their phone.
Yeah.
And it allows you to, like, have that daily check-in with yourself. Like, hey, is this something that I'm working on? Is this something that I'm actively needing more work in? Or am I good on it? Or, like, just the check-ins with yourself. Because just like you said, you're with yourself 24/7. So you gotta...
myself, and I.
Yeah, you gotta keep building that relationship with you. So, yeah, but I'm very proud of you.
No, that means a lot. That really does.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What do you think that you would tell little Zyra?
Oh, man.
What would you tell her?
I would tell little me that, and it might sound so cheesy and cliche, but what little me really needed was someone to tell her, like, hey, you're loved. There's nothing wrong with you. Just because some people can't show their love for you in a healthy way doesn't mean you're not deserving of it. So I would say that, like, that you are deserving of love. You're deserving of peace. Things will get better. Things are shitty now, but they promise it will get better. And that you'll look back on yourself and just see how much you've grown. And, like, despite all the really, really horrible things I've had to go through, like, that has just fueled you to be the strong person that you are. So, like, own it. I think if I was talking to little me, telling little me where I'm at now, little me would be like, there's no way.
Yeah. She's
So,
like, I don't believe you.
I like, really? We've done this?
Yeah.
We did that? Like, yeah. We survived this and that? Like, so I would just want to tell little me, like, again, as cliche it is, like, you are deserving of love and things will be better and you're okay. Like, you're gonna be okay.
Yeah. I feel like over this season alone, you've heard a lot of people's darkest times in their life. You've heard a lot of their, like, even happier times, but you've heard a lot of their, like, make it or break it moments, like things that really have sculpted them and shaped them to the person that maybe they are today, or just their darkest moments in life. With that being said, what do you want your audience to know about maybe your story? The good, the bad, what you maybe have even reflected on and talked about in therapy. Like, what do you think that anybody in your audience could take away from your own personal story?
So I've touched on topics within this on guest episodes that I've done this year. So that's been another cool thing to reflect on. Like, I've been on other podcasts and have done, like, a good amount of guest episodes. So if people wanted, like, a synopsis of Zyra's life, the good and the bad, I'll try to keep it brief just because of time, because I could be here for days. I think, and we kind of touched on this with our episode, was dealing with, like, relationships with a parent that are either no longer available to us or just are not healthy. And I think a lot of people, when you think of a toxic parent or, like, a deadbeat parent, most people think it's the father. And for me, it was my mom. And growing up, that's always been really hard to wrap my head around. And then even as an adult, when I, like, meet new people and they ask, like, oh, what about your family? And I just say, it's my dad and brother. And then they inquire, like, well, what about your mom? Having to explain that, like, well, she chose not to be here. That was her decision. And I basically, since birth, haven't really had a mom, even though she was present until I was 19. And so that has its own bucket of problems, because I think, like, and we touched on this after our episode where, for people that don't have their parent around because of loss or something, that is very difficult. But when you have a parent that is physically present but is not a parent, that's another set of difficulties that not a lot of people can relate to, especially from a mother. So just growing up in a household where I was taught love is conditional with a parent and boundaries were never respected, dealing with all types of abuse, neglect, like physical, like hitting and all that, it's difficult to process. And then especially, I think the hardest part for me growing up was the way she would be hot and cold. So, like, I had to, like, earn her love. She'd be nice to me for, like, a brief second and then, flip a switch. And then I wouldn't be fed. I wouldn't be talked to for months at a time. And so it's just, like, as a child, you don't know how to process that because, like, your mother's supposed to be your number one provider, right? So to have someone that is just so unstable, and then that carrying into me as a teenager where now I have, like, severe abandonment issues and anxious attachment style and just didn't know how to say boundaries. So growing up with guys in school trying to push boundaries and, you know, try to guilt trip you. And now dealing with all of that, that's really difficult.
Yeah.
And for me at the time, I didn't know that stuff was not okay. I just felt this is what the situation is. Even though I'm uncomfortable, I just have to like go along with it because that's just how things are. And so then leading into just graduating high school and dealing with sexual assault instances twice, you know, a few months apart from different people, that 18 to 19 was like the darkest period of my life for sure. Just because you're dealing with one thing. Around that time, my parents are getting divorced. My mom was just about to leave. So I'm dealing with stuff at home. Plus this, didn't have anybody to talk to. It's just really difficult. Like, you just end up thinking everything's your fault and that you deserve this somehow because of just, I think, the narrative being told that you're just a horrible person. So I think the biggest turning point for me was just having to get through it silently by myself. And it is definitely not easy. Like, I'm not saying like people like, oh, just get over it, because that's just not how things work. Yeah. But I think, unfortunately, that is one of the skills I've had to learn in life, is just how to be resilient and just, you know, like tough it up, rub some dirt on it. And it's a trial and error process. I think I definitely handled those situations not in the healthiest way, which carried into now as an adult going through therapy, like guilt I've carried with me. And so that has been a big thing through therapy. I've been learning how to like process my guilt and just the way I responded to things, handled it, and was just trying to like process it. And so I guess like my 2 cents for people listening, whether you've just dealt with, you know, emotionally unavailable parent, or maybe even sexual assault, or just abuse on any level, there is no cookie cutter way of how you're supposed to respond to things. Yeah. I think people try to tell you how you need to respond, whether it's loss, you know, or trauma, like anything. There's no cookie cutter way.
There's no right way to do it.
No, there's no right way. You'll never know how you're going to respond until it happens.
Yeah.
And so give yourself some grace for however you respond. And just learn, just know like there's a learning curve. But as long as you're open, if you can, seek therapy or seek someone that you trust to process it, like you will be able to get through anything that you're getting through. And just, you've survived all your worst days, so you can handle another one. Like, you have the cojones, like you can do it for sure. Like, trust me, like you can. So just for people that are like struggling with suicidal ideation or like severe depression, like just reach out to somebody. Someone is there available to you to listen, even if it's a stranger. Like, yeah, just hang on as much as you can, because it does get better. Yeah. And then once you cross that hill or that valley, however you look at it, whatever's the lowest point for you, like
the ground,
you will look back on everything you've experienced and realize, like, damn, I did that. Yeah. And I think what gets me now through the days, the weeks, months, years is using my experience to help somebody else. And that's honestly, it's been one of the therapeutic parts of the podcast, is hearing other people share their stories and being vulnerable and intimate with me. And then moments like this where I get to share my experience. And I know someone out there is going to get something out of it. Yeah. Whether they've already told me and they've had phone calls late at night, like, hey, I went through something similar and I never expected it. Or random strangers that message me online, like, hey, I needed to hear that guest story. And I'm like, okay, like unfortunately, I had experienced really horrible things, but it's giving me the room to be empathetic, patient, understanding, and available to be there for somebody else. So I think that's just been like the biggest thing that I can say. I'm proud of myself. I've used my trauma and shit in a good way. And I know it's not easy for everyone to do. So I acknowledge that. But I'm thankful that I've been able to do that.
Yeah. I would say the 2 seconds that I was in therapy, if you watch my episode, mm-hmm. After my therapy session, someone had asked me, like, going back, if you could go back in life and rewrite your own story, would you rewrite it differently to take all that shitty stuff that happened to you, or would you just keep the same story? And I kind of like at first didn't know how to answer them, but then I was like, no, like I would, as much as I would really like to rewrite my story, I would probably keep it the same because it really did shape the person I am today. Would you agree, or would you probably rewrite some things?
No, I've said this to people. I think I must have said it on the podcast. Like, I'm not happy things happen to me.
100%.
I'm not thankful, but I am appreciative. And in a weird way, I am grateful because it has made me who I am. I get comments all the time, like, you're so mature for your age. I'm like, yes, it's because it's the trauma.
We had to grow, right?
It's like, I've had
sprinkle of trauma in
right,
it.
like, I had to grow up fast.
Yeah.
And yeah, the way it happened is so shitty, but I wouldn't trade anything because it's shaped me who I am today. I think the qualities of myself that I am the most proud of would not be existent if it wasn't for everything else.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I'm nowhere near perfect. There are things I need to work on. Like, I think people that are no longer in my life would probably listen to this and be like, oh yeah, like you should have shit you need to work on. I acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And I'm doing the work. And if it wasn't for all the things I went through, I probably wouldn't acknowledge that those things need work.
Yeah.
So I try to look at life like half glass full. Because if you look at it half glass empty, like, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to benefit anything out of it. You're not going to grow. You're just going to be sulking and shit and being sad and, like, pity party.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, get your time to acknowledge whatever you need to acknowledge. Like, you have a moment to cry, have a moment to pity party. Like, you're entitled to that. But what are you going to do after?
Right.
Once that moment is, like, over.
Once you've cried.
Yeah.
After.
Right.
Once you've had your little 2 moments. And I agree with that. I'm like, in a lot of situations, I'll cry about it. But what are we going to do after we cry? What are we going to do once we have our little 2 seconds of what the fuck is going on? Or, like...
Yeah, because life doesn't stop. Life is going to keep going. So either you learn how to get back up or you stay stuck on the ground. Yeah. And so...
life will keep going with or without you.
Yeah. So it's just like... And like, I acknowledge that's a skill. Not everybody knows how to do that. And that's the good thing about therapy and life coaches and just having a solid support system to help you get there. Books. But you have to take that first step too. Yeah. So that's the hardest part. It's like literally showing up is the hardest part. But once you've shown up, like... you've done half the work. You've done half of the work. Like, be fucking proud of yourself.
Yeah. Do you think that there's something for next year specifically that you're going to be working on, whether it's in therapy or just even outside of therapy, like within yourself? Do you think that there's something that you're going to specifically try to focus on the most when it comes to mental health?
That's a really good question. Therapy, I don't know, just because I haven't been doing therapy for like a little over 6 months this year. Okay. Just because my therapist and I decided that it wasn't necessary for me anymore. But that's just me. That's just how, like, my situation was. So if there comes something next year where I'm like, okay, I need some help, then maybe I'll go back to therapy. But I think mental health-wise, something I'm really going to try to work on. Man, that's tough. I think just being very cautious of burnt out. Because even with this podcast right now, like the past month or two especially, I have been very burnt out with releasing episodes and stuff. So that's why I've been kind of inconsistent with releasing things like on time, like my reels and all that. Yeah. And so that's why I decided, okay, let me wrap up season 2 now before I'm like no longer producing stuff that's quality or helpful. So just being very conscientious about burnout, especially now with like going to be doing school full time. Finding a balance of like, okay, let me be good on time management, you know, my health, physical health, the gym, and, you know, like finding like my social life balance, friends that are like supportive and healthy. Yeah. I think that's also a big thing, like finding people that are actually really healthy for you and not, you know, like soul vampires where they just drain your energy. So I think those are going to be like the main things for me that I'm going to have to be making sure I'm on top of.
Yeah. I would say one thing that even from my own episode, I feel like one thing I will say is that the burnout was real during that time of my life. I was struggling.
Yeah.
I was struggling, and then right after that episode, it just got darker and darker and darker, and I put more on my plate, and then of course life just lifed, and she beat the shit out of me, and I just could not like get my bearings for a while. So I really think that that message of burnout is really real, because all the times we don't even realize that what we're doing, and then we're in it, we're like, shit, like if I take something off my plate, then I'm this far in already, or then I'm doing myself a disservice, or whatever the situation is. But yeah, the burnout is real. So the fact that you can even self-reflect on that and realize that, okay, maybe for next year, or even right now, you can, no time like the present, but let's not do that for next year.
Yeah, I noticed with the first season, towards the end, I was starting to get burnt out, and then I went into a relationship, so that took my priority and my attention, working full time too, and I kind of just gave it up. And so I was really proud of myself to start it back up again. And now, feeling the burnt out with these last few episodes, I've realized, okay, I'm really going to have to make some adjustments for the next season of the podcast, especially now with doing school full time and knowing like I really need to have that as the priority, like for the next year or two, however the next year looks like. Just knowing, okay, it's okay to reprioritize stuff. And so I think like some things that might change for the next season is, I don't really see myself posting episodes every week, maybe bi-monthly, like twice a week. Not twice a week, twice a month.
I was like, whoa there.
Like,
I was like, cut.
Bi-weekly, so like every other week, twice a month. I think another thing that's attributing to the burnout was, I made an Instagram page for it this year, and I was like really trying to post reels and like really focusing on like the hashtags, analytics, what time of the day, and that just kind of started taking away the fun out of it for me.
Yeah.
And so I realized like, okay, I feel like posting reels lately has been like, it's just a chore. Like, okay, I just have to get this out. And so I realized like, no, I need to make sure I don't make this podcast like a chore. Like, yes, it is work because it is like a brand and like eventually be cool to make it a business. But, I have to remember, why am I doing this? Like, I'm not doing it for the paycheck. Yeah. I'm not doing it for, like the followers and all that. I mean, that'd be cool, but I'm doing it just so like if each episode helps at least one person, I've done it.
Yeah.
That's all I need to do. So it's just, I think, remembering and checking in with yourself, doing inventory. Like, okay, why am I doing this? Am I having fun? Am I enjoying it? If I'm not, okay, what do I need to do to have that back?
Yeah. You had said that your childhood trauma specifically shaped a lot of the person that you are today. And that you even were working on boundaries and intimacy, whether it's like friendships, personal relationships, like dating relationships, things like that. How is that going? Like how's that process of like healing that little you with, that big thing that you are still trying to work on? How is that affecting your current self? Like, how is that going?
Yeah, I think it's been going pretty well. So I've been single all year. This is the first time I've been single for like a decent amount of time since I was 21. So I had 3 relationships and they were all kind of back to back. And so the first half of the year, I really just took time for myself because I just really needed to remember who I was, because the last relationship, I just really lost who I was. I lost myself completely in that. So I took that first year just really finding out, like, what do I like? Who am I? What are things I need to work on and reflect? And was starting to chip at that. And so part of that, like, healing and reflection was, okay, like, I think I want to start dating again. And I'm going to be talking more like romantic relationships, because that's kind of been a bigger one for me lately. But like, towards the end of the summer, I was like, you know what? I will download the apps for the first time. I've never really done online dating, but I'm going to give it a shot, because part of me was like, I just want to see what is out there.
Yeah.
And learn more about myself. And my biggest intention before I downloaded Hinge and Bumble was, what exactly am I wanting and looking for in a partner? And being very blunt and straight up about it. And also I wanted to challenge myself. Like, okay, I want to be more bold. I want to speak up for myself. So like, now's the time for me to show up and do it.
Yeah.
So I think I've mentioned this in one of the other episodes, but like my first online date, I told the guy straight up, expectations with communication. Where are you at? Because this is what I like. So I'm like, I'm just going to put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the other people I've dated, I've just been more bold. Like, this is how I feel. Like, my faith. I've started going back to church within the past, like, 2 months at the time we're recording this. So being more upfront, like, that is a priority for me right now because I'm really trying to explore that more and just, like, meet someone that is on the same page. And, you know, values and long-term, you know, like, education, work, like, just, like, figuring it all out. So I think in terms, like, to answer your question, like, I've seen reflection and growth in that just because I've been really intentional with challenging myself and pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And even like the people that like I've been talking to or have dated, just be straight up of like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I like and I don't like.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, like take it or leave it, bye.
Yeah.
And then, you know, people I have dated and I realize like, oh, we're not compatible. Like, hey, be more bold. Like, not ghosting. I'm like, I'm not a ghoster. Like, I'll tell you, like, hey, I'm sorry,
Same.
but I'm not feeling it. I don't see this going anywhere.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it. Or interesting encounters
Yeah.
I've had at the gym
Yeah.
or just in the wild
right.
with strange people. We'll just say that nicely.
Out in the wild.
Out in the wild. Just being more bold of like, you're making me very uncomfortable. I don't appreciate that.
No.
And you're not respecting my boundary. So that's been that. I think also with like friendships that like I've shared with you, or because I am so caring and giving, I can make myself too available. And I think people expect that all the time and can take me for granted.
Yeah.
And so I'm just having to really put my foot down on boundaries of like, no, I can't accept phone calls every day to help you with your venting, or hey, I didn't really appreciate this. Can we talk about it? Or just being like, no, I'm not going to do that because that's not what I want to do. Like, it's cool if you want to do that, but like, that's not where I'm at right now in life. And like, that's not my interest. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think it's just like, I've just been very intentional with like challenging myself to speak up, like the speaking up part with therapy. And like as a childhood, like I never was able to do that. So I've been very proud of myself that now I've been bolder with like
you can feel the growth. Right?
Oh yeah, like I'm just now like I don't give a fuck.
Right.
Like, I'm not gonna tiptoe around your feelings. If you're making me uncomfortable, like
if it's your feelings or mine, I'm gonna pick me every time.
And I've always prioritized everybody else, and I've learned through therapy, especially like I'm allowed to put myself first because it is my life. It is my experience. If I am unhappy, then I am at a disservice to everybody, especially myself. So why am I going to do that?
Yeah.
So just remind people, like, put yourself first sometimes. Yeah. It is okay.
Yeah.
If people don't respect that or take offense to it, they shouldn't be in your life.
Yeah. For people who are afraid to do that, what would you say your response has been from doing that? Like, I know there could be 50-50. Maybe, you know, you've gotten not the greatest response, especially when you started doing it for the first time.
Yeah.
Like, you were still kind of building up that confidence to do that. Not that the response of anybody else matters, but have you seen, like, even the response that people have given you, your clap back to some of their feedback for you?
So are you asking, like, what their response is to me, or, like...
Yeah, so, like, their response to your
boundaries. You know, I think most of the time, like, I would say it's like about a bit like a 50-50. I would say most people would say, like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, I appreciate you bringing it up. Or some people have definitely been petty about it. And then, you know, like the interesting men in the wild have definitely been very offended by it, which is fine because I really don't care.
Right.
Just like...
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Sorry about it, babe.
No, yeah. I think it just really depends. But I've definitely had to, you know, cut friends off because of it. Or more like acquaintances. Cut acquaintances off. it comes to dating, just putting my foot down and just like, you don't like it? That's too bad. Like, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Or like close friends, I bring something up, and like I've been very thankful that they've all been very respectful about it, and that is why we're still friends.
Yeah.
So even like having conversations with like my dad or my brother this year of like little things, I've been more bold, like, hey, can I please talk about something that's been bothering me? And I bring it up, and they're like, oh, I had no idea. I'm like, yeah, well, I want to bring it up because I think there's another thing I've learned about myself, especially when it came to any type of relationship, is I would bottle things in, and eventually I'd build resentment about it. And then by the time I exploded and brought up, the other person would be like, whoa, I didn't realize it was this big of a deal.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize it was this, we've gotten this deep.
Right. And so I've just been a lot more vocal saying like, hey, I want to bring up something that's bothering me or something I've noticed. Like, can I bring up an observation? And if they get offended, okay, then like, well, I know it's not me because I know I always try to be as respectful as I can.
Yeah.
Granted, sometimes I can be very blunt. So that's something I've been working on, like, okay, delivery, right? But if they don't like it, and depending if they react really negatively about it, where it's just like becomes pettiness, then you probably don't need that friend or that person in your life.
Yeah.
But like if they're upset, but you guys can have an adult conversation about it, that I think is a relationship worth keeping. Yeah. Because you're never going to agree on stuff. Mm-mm. That's just part of it.
Sometimes you just got to agree to disagree and be like, you know what? I validate your feelings. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but I'll work on that. Right. Sometimes it's just really that easy. Yeah. That's it.
Just having a conversation. It's hard. Yeah. But when you show up, then I think it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you had recapped on your kind of priorities moving forward for even the next season. Are there going to be things that you are going to try to talk about more on the podcast, or is it going to be kind of like the same season as this season, season 2, or what are you thinking about towards season 3 exactly?
That's a good question. I really have no idea, because I think what's been surprising with this season was how much of the guests were people that found me online, whether it was TikTok, Reddit,
really,
Reddit? Instagram. Yeah, like honestly, a lot of my guests this year found me on Reddit, and I built a website for the podcast so you can book appointments with me directly there. So I would like get emails and like notifications like, oh, I found you online, I would love to be a guest. And I just like to have the episodes where it's catered to whatever they want to talk about, because if they're the guest, I want to hear what you're passionate about or what you want to share. Yeah. So like this season, there was a lot on neurodiversity, like ADHD, autism, especially, schizophrenia, which I was really surprised with, like how many people wanted to talk about that. Compared to the first season, I don't think I had any episodes that touched on it at all. So that was really cool to see. I think this season was a lot more diverse in terms of topics. For next season, I think, if there was anything I really wanted to like touch more on, I think kind of more on like mental and physical health. So like an episode I've been wanting to touch on is birth control. Like I haven't really touched on this, but at 18 up until this year, I was on the pill, and it was I got on it because of acne. Yeah. And so it was a big thing I was learning towards the end of last year, was just health and side effects and all that. So this year I challenged myself. I'm like, well, I'm single, so like, like I'm going to get off of it, and like,
why would I keep taking it?
Right. Like I want to like learn my body and like be healthy. And so I think wanting to touch to more holistic people of like resources like that, and like how it affects the mental health and everything, because I think there's a lot of information that people don't realize with that, and maybe kind of just more like, I've done quite a few episodes on burnout, but I think burnout looks so differently in different fields, so I think wanting to touch more on episodes on that. And honestly, it's just really hard to say, because it just really depends what guests I meet that want to share the stories. And I'm just very open, because even though I've done episodes on like, let's say burnout multiple times, a new person can share the experience, and there's something new I learn every single time. Yeah. I think one thing for sure I would love to do is like collaborate with more podcasters, because that has been really fun to be collaborating with podcasters and like being on each other's episodes or shows. And so just kind of meeting more people in that realm with regards to mental health, I think would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think that even with your master's program, there'll be topics in psych that you will learn and things you'll just leave class. You're like, oh my God, I have this idea and we're totally going to do it.
You know, I've actually really thought about that. I've really actually have thought about that a lot. So positive psychology, for people that don't know, that's more focused on preventative care. So you're looking more on like resiliency and things like that of, okay, what are like our strengths that we can really focus on that will help us stay above the baseline. So I think an analogy that I've learned recently that I really love, therapists are similar to like physical therapists. So you're having an injury or you're dealing with something, you would go see a physical therapist to get fixed and healed, to be back to normal, right?
Right.
Versus a life coach is like a personal trainer. So there's nothing wrong with you. You have no injuries, but you want to get stronger. You want to build your form better and you want to build upon that. So life coach is kind of something like that's a step after therapy. And that's now the career field I want to go into. I want to go into life coaching. And I think I've been called to want to do resiliency. So that ties hand in hand with positive psychology. So, you know, some of the classes I'm going to be learning in my program is on resiliency and adversity, family dynamics, and all this really interesting stuff. So I think as I keep going through the program, I'm probably going to want to do episodes like, these are things I've been learning.
Yeah.
Like, please take the information.
Yeah. I don't want to harbor and gatekeep this knowledge. Like, here, take it.
Like, I think that's going to be really cool. So there might be more episodes where it's just me talking. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I really love episodes with somebody.
Yeah.
Because I love the discussion back and forth. Because I think you just learn so much.
Yeah, you do.
But I don't know. I really have no idea how this next season will go. I really don't know how long this break will be. I'm hoping no more than like a few months. But we'll have to see how with school things go.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to like just force content just to force content.
When it comes to birth control, I know you had said like more even holistic approaches to that. Have you tried any? Would you, and if you have, would you be willing to share like maybe what you've tried or?
In terms of like form of birth control?
Right.
So I actually just bought this ring. It's called the Aura ring for people that listen. And it tracks your body temperature, tracks your sleep, your activity, recovery, and all that. It's really in depth. It's so, even if you're a guy, like my closest guy friend has a ring, and like we will compare our stats with each other. It makes you a lot more self-conscious about your health.
Yeah.
But it connects to that called natural cycles. And so it'll track your fertility based on your temperature. And so as a female, I think it's just really cool to just get a better idea of like how your body naturally is,
right.
Like your different, the phases in your cycle and all that. And so I've had this for like, I think a little over a month.
Nice.
Almost 2 months actually. And it's just been a trip to see of like, oh, okay, I'm learning more about myself. Like, especially like if you go to the gym, there's different phases in your cycle. You might be more tired or exhausted versus other times you might have a little bit more testosterone and hormones so you can like push weight.
Yeah.
So seeing how that compares to my cycle has been a trip, and just my mood, you know, my drive, like just like everything, like just as an adult, like as you should be feeling it.
Right.
So I would recommend for someone that doesn't want to be on hormones and you want to go natural, like natural cycles with the Aura ring is really cool. You can even do it with your watch or like a temperature thing.
Yeah.
So that would just be like my little snippet on that.
Yeah, and I think if you decide to talk about it more in like an episode of birth control, I think that'd be really interesting for people, like you said, who have maybe been on it, even from high school. A lot of people start birth control when they're in high school from cramps, relieving cramps, and you know, acne and things like that. So it'd be a really cool episode to touch on. I
definitely want to do it.
Yeah.
Like I definitely want to. I've been like looking at people on Instagram like that teach this stuff. So I'd really love to learn more about it because there's so much information on it that I did not know before getting off of birth control.
Because they always tell you just, take the pill or do this form. Like, here's this.
And ultimately, it's a Band-Aid, and I'm not shitting on birth control. Yeah. Like, if it works for you, great. Like, for me, it worked amazing. I loved it. But by the end of it and comparing this year, I'm like, I feel way better now compared to the past 8 years.
Yeah.
And so I took the precautions before getting off birth control to help with like the fear of acne and like mood swings and all that. So I think I've had a very good experience so far.
Nice. All right. So one last thing.
Yeah.
What do you want your audience to take away from, if this is like their first episode, for example, what do you want to say to recap this season of your podcast?
Well, if this is your first encounter with me, hi, I'm glad you're here. Nice to meet you. I hope that you take away out of my podcast or just mental health podcast platforms in general is there's so much to learn about mental health. It is not a taboo thing. Everybody's got issues, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them, if that makes sense. I think the best thing we can do is be curious and want to learn and have these discussions. And that is why I've been doing the podcast, because these discussions are so important. I think back to little me. If I had someone to talk to me about the issues that I've been talking about now as an adult, that would have saved me years of pain and healing.
Because nobody talks about it.
Right. So I'm just here to do my part on breaking the stigma that mental health is taboo. I think we're doing a lot better about it within the past 2 years. I think we're doing really well. Still lots of work, but we're heading there. And so I just want to say, like, hey, if you have a story you want to share eventually, please reach out to me. I would love to have you on. If you feel even so inspired to like talk with your friends or family, like, I commend you for that bravery, because it is scary and it takes some guts. Like, it definitely does, but there's something very cathartic and therapeutic of once you finally done it. And I think you just need to learn, like, you need to prioritize your mental health. And so if there's unhealthy relationships you are in or that are around you, just really check in with yourself and reconsider what is best for you in the long run. So that, and I'm here for you. I'm always a DM away or even an email away. And so and I'd appreciate that. I just appreciate that people would even want to listen to me talk.
Yeah.
Especially because I'm so used to interviewing. So like me talking, that's crazy for me.
Are there any podcasters that you like to listen to that even help and that maybe you could recommend to other people?
Ooh, yeah. So
or that you would like to work with?
Ooh. So On Purpose by Jay Shetty. He has an amazing like self-help podcast. I've read both his books. He used to be a monk. He's no longer a monk, but he's a life coach. And he does really good episodes. He has amazing people on. Even if you follow social media pages, like he just really has a lot of really good resources. Just another podcast called To Be Better with a couple on it. I think they just have a really good dynamic of just discussing about more like masculine and feminine dynamics and all that. So I think that's really interesting. How to Do the Work. Is it How to Do the Work? I might be butchering it. I'll include the links of the podcast shows in the show notes for people who are curious. But I think she's done her podcast recently. Like she's only been doing it for this year. And she's a relationship coach. And her style, she's very quirky, kind of blunt, like very East Coaster.
Yeah.
But she brings up really good points. Matthew Hussey has a podcast on relationships. So I think he has some pretty good insights from a male, because most of his audience is female. And I feel like most people that listen to these podcasts are female.
Yeah.
At least half. So I think he just has really good insights on like relationships, if that's what you're looking for. But yeah, those are my recommendations.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Well,
do you want to sign out and sign off on your very last episode to season 2 of Complex Like Wine?
I guess we shall. Cheers.
Cheers.
It is kind of surreal to be like, this is the last episode for season 2. starting this season was a big one for me, you know, going through like a crazy transition this beginning of the year, coming out of a relationship, losing some friendships, starting a new job. Like there's just a lot of things going on. And I had been wanting to continue the podcast for a while, but I just kept procrastinating it because the imposter syndrome was so real.
Yeah.
So to finally do it again has been really cool, and to see how much the podcast has grown has been really awesome. And so I just want to say to everybody that's been listening since day one, and even just this season, just anyone listening, like I appreciate all of you so much. All the messages I get every week have been so touching, and it's so cool, and just kind of always gives me a reminder why I keep doing an episode every week. And so that I appreciate you all, I love you all, and that I don't know when season 3 will be back, so please just be patient and hang on, you know, maybe rewatch some episodes, I don't know, but I know I definitely wanted to do this again, so it will definitely come back, and we'll see how differently it looks. It'll be a learning curve for sure, but you know, I definitely will bring back content that I'm learning from grad school, so I think that'll be exciting for some people, so yeah. But I love you guys. Thank you so much. Yeah. And if you're having a glass with me and Jasmine, like cheers.
Cheers.
Even if it's just water, cheers.
Cheers.
And yeah, we'll see you soon, whenever that is.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.